everybody. My name is Alex. I am the Makerspace Specialist here at the Missoula Public Library. If you haven't been here before or aren't super familiar, the Makerspace is down on the first floor. It's on the right-hand side as you're walking in the main doors. And it's pretty self-explanatory. We make stuff down there. So we got a bunch of different tools and toys. We have laser cutters and engravers. We have 3D printers. You can see something on Anteo 3D printed right here on the table that I'll let him get into later. We have CNC machines that cut stuff out of wood and metal and all sorts of stuff. So we just have a bunch of fun toys and stuff to help people make things that, tools that aren't the most accessible for regular people, right? And we do it at no cost to the person. The only thing we ever charge for is materials, and we just charge to replace those. So for example, if you come in and want to 3D print something, the only thing we will charge you for is the plastic that you used to make the thing, and we just charge how much we paid for it. So hopefully people see it as a really good resource. I think it's really cool. I think it's a really fun place to work, and we get to make and see all sorts of cool stuff. Our role here with Anteo has been, one, giving him a place to work, and giving him, like I said, providing a lot of these tools so that he can make different things. A lot of the sound stuff he's been doing on his own. We don't have a lot of tools for that, but other things, like the thing he 3D printed on the table, we were able to help him with, and bounce out some other ideas and stuff like that. But that's been our role, I think. That's all I got. Does anybody have any questions? Sweet. Awesome.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, the reason I'm a composer is so I don't usually have to get up in front of people and perform. So, but that's a little facetious. I play the drums as well. I thought I'd give a little maybe intro quickly. First of all, thank you to the open air residency. Thank you so much to Stoney and to Kelly. They've been it was really fortuitous. I just couldn't say no when they offered me this opportunity just to get to see Missoula, and just to see like just how cool it is here. I really like it, and I really hope that I get to be back. The other residents are really awesome and make great work, so I definitely encourage you to also check out what they're doing. And overall, it's been super fun so far. Thank you so much to Alex. He's helped me with stuff. I'll get into it. I thought I'd leave that sort of for the end. I'll give a brief tour of like who I am, how I got started, and I guess the theme is going from being a composer to being more of a sound artist, because that's sort of where I'm realizing at this point I feel a little more comfortable being. As you were walking in, you kind of heard this. This is a piece that I wrote quite recently that is just truly experimental. I haven't really released anything on this yet. It's just, it takes in, first it gets the weather data and it creates, based on like the temperature, it creates like the viewport size, and then these are all instruments that are like synth instruments, and these are ASCII values that like are captured. Each pixel is transformed into ASCII and is like read according to like what it is, and each one is assigned a different volume. And so when you hear it, it's just this sort of essentially cacophony. It's noise. But I like noise, I guess.
Yeah.
So just briefly, I'm originally from Zurich. It's a city, but it's in the mountains. Reminds me a lot of Missoula, actually. There's a lot of mountains where I grew up. When I was 8, I moved to downtown Brooklyn. That's a view of downtown Brooklyn from Gowanus. And now I live in sunny Tucson, Arizona. That's my little house right there. I guess I am inspired by nature and the elements and where I am, so I do feel like those I change based on sort of like, my environment. Where I kind of want to start is like after undergrad, because I think that's sort of where things got interesting for me. Like I started composing in high school. I played a lot of different instruments, the drums, the trumpet, the guitar, and undergrad was was an interesting time. I learned a lot. I discovered spectral music, and I discovered a program called Open Music, which hopefully I'll get to demonstrate a little bit. But I didn't really like combine it in ways that felt meaningful to me yet. So this, I would say, is like the first piece that I wrote that I really felt like good about. And what I think we'll do is maybe I'll just play like 2 minutes from just various different excerpts so we can kind of get a feel of the sound, because there's more to listen to than to see, honestly. And feel free to stop me along the way if you have questions about anything, but you can also wait till the end. This is a piece that I wrote for solo cello. It might also be considered like my first foray into like the visual world, because the score is a graphic score. It's not conventional notation. I had this idea of like mapping an ocean wave onto like the cello's register, and so what you'll notice is kind of looks like a wave, and that was actually mapped onto this bowing speed. And so like up here is like fast bowing speed, and down here is slow bowing speed. And so I'm asking the cellist to sort of like start quickly, slow down, and speed back up, and so forth. And then there are these like other sections. It also comes with like a long like description to sort of help decipher it. And that's kind of the first sort of issue that you run into when you make, I guess, when you're making graphic scores. It becomes a challenge to sort of like notate things correctly while making them look somehow visually compelling to a performer. And the question also becomes like, is this the artwork or is this purely the notation? And it's kind of a gray area. But I'll just, let's see. I'll just play from the beginning. Feel free to check out any of my music, by the way, and follow me on SoundCloud if you have one and are so inclined. So that was this piece. It kind of threw me into this world of questions of how visuals play a role in my music, and so I guess the next work that I wrote that was also important to me is this. Again, it's about an ocean wave. Onde cassé just means broken waves in French. And it's sort of, well, I ended up doing this in a church, and I had specifically this church in mind, and then it really just sort of serendipitously happened. I met someone who worked in this church, and I was like, what are the chances I can get in there and do like a recording of a piece? And he was really into it, and so we ended up having a little concert. And so what I did was I wrote a piece for 4 violins, And the material is very self-similar, and it's sort of like they're passing back and forth these, musical phrases, but the audience can only see one violinist who's standing there, and the other three are hiding here in the transepts or the apse. In that case, you can't really see them from where you're sitting because this is sort of like the audience view. So it kind of gives off the effect that there's this violin that's being somehow like endlessly sort of extended and morphed. So yes, I'll just play a couple minutes of that as well. And I got the score here. There's an artist that I sort of inspired me, a visual artist inspired me, whose name is Chris Burden. I don't know if some of you might be, yes.
Question, was the audience in on that there was more than one violin player?
Loosely, yes. That's a good question. I didn't sort of, it was pretty self-evident when they walked out on stage, yeah. So I would say like, yes. Sure, yeah.
Do you write all your pieces in 5/4? Or?
Most of them actually. Yeah, I love 5/4 because I commonly use it a lot because it allows. That's so funny you asked that. The last piece I wrote is all in 5/4. It's like it allows for the performer to kind of get around the pulse, that really sort of normal feeling pulse of 4/4, and to sort of not feel pulse. That's kind of what I wanted here. I wanted to sort of like orchestrate my own kind of pulse. So it's sort of in mixed time signatures, but I was trying to get away from these like, multiples of 4. I always am, yeah. Quickly about Chris Burden, he's been called an endurance artist, which for one of his final works at his thesis piece was he locked himself in a locker for 5 days, and it was called Locker Piece. Another one, he gets shot in the arm. It's just called Shoot. And so there's this element of endurance art that I appreciate, and it can be tough for me to also work with some musicians, because some really resonate with this idea of kind of really putting their physicality into the music. This is a bit of an endurance achievement for the 4 violinists, because it's 20 minutes long and they're just kind of going, and I struggle with that because in classical music school it's very much you're supposed to write something that feels very comfortable, but at the same time a lot of innovations came from making do uncomfortable things that sound good. So yeah, that's just, I guess, for what's worth. Let's see, the next thing that I wanted to highlight was, because I don't think I talked enough about this process that I'm also really currently invested in, which is sort of generating music, or music that is generated by design, and what that means. And it's really broad, and I have some more examples down the line, but basically it has to do with not so much composing as transforming is sort of the most sort of basic way I can think about it. This was a piece for cello and harp. This was, my sister's a harpist, and my brother-in-law, her husband, is a cellist. And we were quarantining during the pandemic. I went to visit them in Tucson during my spring break in grad school, and I ended up just stuck there for 10 weeks, because that was the beginning of the lockdown. And during that time, we all lost our work, because we were all musicians. We had nothing really to do, and so we started playing chamber music, and I started writing music. And at the same time, my brother-in-law was going through the loss of his father, not due to COVID, due to other things. And so it was a really hard time for everybody there, because it was just, you know, I'm sure you all remember what the COVID lockdown felt like, and we were trying to figure out ways to kind of stay positive. And he wanted me to write him a piece, and so I wanted him to have something that like he could sort of sink his teeth into, and sort of like, you know, use as a way of dealing with what he was going through. Ultimately, like it's hard for me. Would have been hard for me to like really relate and write a piece truly from my emotions about like what death is like. So I think that's sort of what got me on this idea of that, like, there's other things out there that have probably said it better, that have this sort of, that can be a vehicle to deeper connection that I'm capable of. And one of those things that I found was it was the Smithsonian Archive. So Alan Lomax was an ethnomusicologist who traveled through America recording music by anyone who, I guess, was considered like a folk musician who wasn't necessarily recording the music themselves. Actually, Steve had a really good point the other day when we spoke at our meeting. I was like, "Are you recording some of the songs you're writing?" He's like, "No, it's just going to be in the ether." And that's sort of what Alan Lomax set out to record. He was like, "There's so much music out there in America that's not being, you know, recorded and documented." So it was like as a project, it's all public domain, it's all like free to look at and in a way like interact with, which was great for me as well, because I didn't have to worry about any sort of rights or anything. But the thing though is that I also edited this heavily, so you can barely tell that it's based on this, but I did want to play you like a little bit of this. What I ended up doing was I just grabbed the audio recording and I threw it into Ableton, and I like translated it to MIDI, and I threw it back into Sibelius, and it was like super messy and weird, and I sort of like went and filtered it and like added a few things here and there to make it more look like cello music. But essentially like the cadences and the line is apparent. I also stretched it out, so it's like, it's very heavily processed, but there is this, I want to say like the essence, is my hypothesis, is that the essence kind of remains of this, like the depth of this music. So I'll give you like a short little.
Oh, Dad, oh, Dad, I'm ill for another year. What is that I can't see? I just got a hold on me. I am death, from your soul, gonna leave your body and leave it cold. Oh, Dad. Oh, Dad, turn me over another year. Oh, yeah.
So, verse like structure. This is like, oh, Dad. This is sort of what that turned into. And then it's like, oh, Dad. It's very very heavily edited, as you see, but it's sort of like that. You'll hear that throughout the piece because Nimrod Workman in that video is singing it over and over again. So I'll show you kind of what that sounds like. So it's actually two movements. The end is.
Oh.
You're gonna guess. It's extraordinarily tonal ending that I kind of just tacked on there, you know, to make it feel good. I actually have a lot of issues with that. There's also so these movements are one is actually that, and then the other is just a series of like I found I did the same thing with different sounds of bells. So like I was able to like, you know, and then I sort of just, I messed with them on Ableton and found like a really interesting sounding chord that I liked, and I translated that into MIDI and you know.
So that's, you're translating into MIDI, but then you're actually writing a score that then your, say, brother-in-law or,
Yeah.
and they're playing that
Right,
bass.
Right. So it's just kind of,
Yeah.
multiple transformations.
Anteo, can you, for us lay people, can you break down maybe just a very basic idea of what it means to be putting this music into these programs,
Sure.
and like what may be a key feature, like why would you put it in one and then to the other? What's happening along the way?
Sure, yes. It really depends on what you want to do for what like program you end up wanting to use. What I wanted to do was, Ableton has a really neat, powerful, and kind of quirky feature as well that is called like translation from audio to MIDI, which is, audio is any recorded sound. MIDI is actually like essentially numerical information that a digital instrument synthesizer can use to play a sound or a sample, and so it becomes like digitized. Essentially, it's going from recording sound to a series of values that can be read by a computerized machine, and from there you can also edit those values using certain programs like Ableton and yeah.
And one more, just to piggyback off of that. So when you take it back, you've translated it, and now you're at the other side of it. How much of your intuition, like there's very much like the spirit of that song is like resonant and deep and like about existence, and so is your translation, and how much of that stays inside of the kind of editing migration, and how much of it are you bringing back into that, if that makes sense?
That's a great question, because it's first of all, it's always different, and second of all, like sometimes I'm like afraid to do too much, and I know, and that's why I think I mentioned how I feel more of like a informationist than a composer in some ways. Like I think where I feel comfortable is not writing how I feel about something, but maybe finding a way to bring something that resonates with me into the world that I know how to interact with. And obviously my feelings come out there. This piece in particular was, I took it very liberally, sort of like there were times where I was like, I just need the cello to end this way for this to feel, good. That's always hard because, like I said, I ended it with something completely different, and I don't like it anymore. And I feel like there's this weird line that you can't cross, and there's this point where it's like, okay, you've done enough of your own editing, your own input, like leave the truth sort of be, So I guess I'm still sort of, exploring that for
So
sure.
you need that resolve. You're having a hard time just letting it be noise, right?
It's gotten easier somehow. Like it's like the first time you do it, you're like, this is music.
Totally.
It's just data. So like getting to know, and there's another composer that I'm inspired by called Yannis Xenakis, who was an architect originally. He was a political prisoner in Greece and had to flee to Paris. And he didn't have any work, and he met Olivier Messiaen, who's another composer, very kind of visionary composer, and started taking lessons from him, and realized that the music that he wanted to write was these transformations of his architectural work, of his architectural blueprints, and all these other sort of algorithms that he was sort of tinkering with as an architect. And what he was able to ultimately do was achieve a completely unique sound world that spoke specifically of like his music, that was like his way. It was almost kind of non-derivative. And there's an element to that. If I free write, I always end up writing Bridge Over River Kwai or Louie Louie or something like that. I'm always like, there's just so much other folks' stuff in here. And so and this, what's interesting, ironically, is that this ends up being like only that, but I feel like it's at least in a way that is more interesting to me. Okay, we're gonna get to the absurd portion of the of the evening, or rather, like this is where visuals again became this like really important feature. I was working with Max MSP actually. I forget it wasn't Rainbow. It was Jitter actually, and it had these. I found some really interesting patches, and I found interesting. I found source material that was like kind of, interesting to me at the time. Wrestling. There's something just funny and absurd about wrestling to me. I don't know. I just think it's like so wild how it's like all a performance, and then afterwards everybody kind of shakes hands and splits the money, and it's like it's just the performative aspect to me. And also I think while I was in grad school, I was sort of I was kind of exploring the masculine versus the feminine. There's a lot of salience in that to me, especially, and I think to many of us right now. It's something that really interests me. This sort of dichotomy, or like what's expected and what it's a big topic, and I'm not my way of dealing with it is more maybe like trying to make something that addresses my subconscious, if anything, and not so much like the whatever. I'm just giving disclaimers. Let's just get to In the melodic aspect is also a kind of a systematized process of sequences that sort of just continuously go further up in the register, and it kind of ends just extremely like high up. It's sort of like, as you can see, like I have no idea what I'm doing visually at this point. It's just like there's certain things that I like, there's certain processes that I like to set in motion and just kind of like watch them unfold, and I was, yeah. So this was kind of like the first time I really like put out something to like be sort of visually appreciated. I found an STL file. It's essentially like the file that you can 3D print, and there are many like open source STL files. And I found one of the Belvedere torso, which you'll see. It's pretty recognizable. Maybe it's in the Met Museum in New York. It's just like a destroyed Greek statue of a torso. And I had it printed on like a small model, and then I superimposed these graphics over it. Actually, that look similar to the ones that I just showed. And then I filmed that, and I had a camera that was like a live stream of just the film of the little statue with the like a mini projector of graphics onto the statue. It'll make more sense when you see it. I kind of want to build the excitement. Trust me, it'll get good. But so there's a statue. There's a little projector projecting onto the statue itself, and then there's a camera filming that, and then that feed gets projected onto like the big screen in the hall. And so the performer comes in and actually can like put her hand between that, and then her hand is like massive on it. So you'll see. I'll also start it around here. There's a Renaissance ensemble in the back as well, meaning, Renaissance. There's a bass Renaissance flute and a theorbo, which is this really long instrument, and then just an oboe and a horn, it's percussion. Anyway, it's still kind of like I think lingering in the subconscious realm for me. Like the visuals, like I kind of know what I want to see, but I don't exactly know why. And I was okay with that at first because I kind of feel like you have to like go a little bit and just do something, and then you can step back and be like, well, and then maybe psychoanalyze yourself from there. Being in psychoanalysis finally was super helpful, by the way, for my artistic process. But that's another story. I guess I just quickly, like, a couple themes of what interests me and what you can kind of find in a lot of my work. It's very long form, I think, what I make. It evolves very slowly, and it's there's definitely an expansiveness to it. I also, infinity is kind of new for me. Like, I like the idea of writing a piece of music that can be like totally different every single time. Or that can be like rearranged like many with different permutations, so that, like, you know, sort of like a chess game, there's a finite amount of chess games possible, but it's just a huge number that it's not, you know, it's quasi-infinite. Yeah, so this gets me to what I'm doing here. So there's no really sound. Now we're all kind of in the visual realm. This is going to be a piece for 2 gongs. I'm writing a piece for gong and flute that's getting played in Italy this summer, in late July. And that got me started about like figuring out what I want to do, how I want to like notate music for the gong. It struck me that the gong is this like big sort of flat surface that can almost sort of be seen as a canvas for a kind of projection or something. It doesn't, you know, there are certain ways to play correctly, but it doesn't mean I want that, you know. And so I found a way to maybe like play the gong in a way that's just kind of different and more related to something that you see, or something that has like a visual link. This model I made with Alex's help, actually, in the makerspace. It's an STL file of, can anybody guess what it is? Missoula Valley, yeah, correct. But I made a few of these, and so was that a really dumb question? Sorry, like, I'm just talking a bunch of Missoulans showing a map of Missoula, like, where is this? but anyway, so but there's, you know, I'm experimenting with like topography, I guess, and so like my notation, I haven't really fully developed it yet, but it would consist of maybe, first of all, engraving this in wood with the circles visible and having that be the score, and then having like instructions that basically ask you to, you know, I was thinking maybe putting like points like A, B, C, D, and then having it be cross map, and then this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something, just things like that. So being like, you know, and trace maps like A1 to B2 to C3 or something like that. And so have the, and I like these like rubber mallets on the gong that you can kind of like scrape a gong, and it creates this like really eerie kind of like, and it's depending on where the scraping kind of picks up, you can get a lot of different pitches, which I think is super cool. So it allows for like, you know, you can get a lot out of it. So if I can notate, it's basically an exercise in like systematization of music to follow like the visual. So if I can say like, you know, trace this line just straight, but every time you go higher up in elevation, you're going to want to pull faster. Every time you go slow, like further down, you want to pull slower, and that gives like essentially the gong. I mean, that creates, you know, variation in the way that the gong resonates.
It's different every time.
It'll also be different every time. Yeah, exactly. It's very John Cage.
Yeah. I like it.
Fluxus is a big inspiration. I like Fluxus a lot. That's
Yeah.
a movement where everything's kind of synesthetically mashed together. So there's 3 printers down there. I can pass this around. This is the first prototype. I wanted to create a family of flutes that were tuned linearly to their size, because it's just might generate an interesting harmony. What I want is like a very, very long form piece. Here, I don't know. I don't want to have to make you get up and stuff. It's very like throw it. It's a primitive. Yeah, feel free to throw it. You can throw it. It doesn't work. So that's the thing. It doesn't work. Yeah, it's a failed prototype.
Yeah, I want to put my mouth on it.
Yeah, you may. I already did those. But yeah, it's basically, I want to create a chord. I want to write a piece that's just a chord, but it's like a really unique chord that you can change a little bit, but that ultimately, like, there's something like very stable about it. And to me, that the ocarina is really good at that. You can create like really stable sounds. And so if I find different ways to like space these things, it'll yeah, it's really an experiment. I don't know really where it gets me. It's a way of creating a tuning system from some, you know, from an algorithmic process.
How did you end up getting it hollow? Because we had talked about that before. What was the process?
So I found someone on Fiverr who is an STL file maker, who's like a designer, and I just gave him this. I made this. I was like, this is what I needed. I think this might get me to what I want. And so that person gave me the file, and it was hollow inside. And then Alex and I, well, Alex was like, we're gonna have to cut this in half and glue it together. It's not gonna. So he actually edited the file and printed both halves with like some supports, and then he just glued it together. I'm learning how hard it is to really engineer a musical instrument well. It's quite the process. It's not as easy as just getting someone on Fiverr to do it, but that's the beauty of it, right? I think that has to do with something with the sound hole. It's not like the air doesn't have a way to like crack somehow. The airstream is supposed to like crack from what I understand. It's not. So anyway, back to the drawing board. I'll try to have this figured out before I leave, because I'd love to get a couple of these printed and just be able to, play them back in Arizona. Systematization is also something that like allows me to interact with visuals. They don't necessarily have to be my own. I found this book at the Natural Science Center on our tour, and I like borrowed it. Essentially, it was just around, and I opened it up, and I saw that there is this like very intriguing looking system to how everything is like laid out here. And a score of music is a system. It's like a coded system, and so like anything in a way can be a score. I mean, this is also kind of getting into John Cage kind of territory, where like you just take something and you attribute values to it. Some of these X's are capital, some of these are lowercase. This is like the abundance of the specific plant. These are like families, and then there are divisions, and there are families, and then there are individual plants. And I'm not there yet, but I found a copy online, and I ordered it to my home in Tucson. So I think this is going to be a piece for like a jazz combo. Like, I play drums. I have my brother-in-law plays cello, and I have a friend who's an electric guitarist, and anybody else who kind of wants to join, and we're going to find ways to like interpret this and to like play parts of it. And what I like is that it could suck, but it could also be really interesting. But it's a super long book. There's like 70 pages here, and it's just kind of a matter of like, where do we start from? Like, you can say like, this is gonna be a 10-minute thing. Let's start from page 72, and then just go to page 79 and just like see what the piece is. And so it's I don't know. I think there's a lot of fun to be had in that regard. That's it. That's it. That's where we're at the most forefront of my thinking process right now. So I thought I was able to catch you up to speed. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
For the opera thing, are you a fan of opera?
So I have a really hard relationship with opera. Like I like it in some moments. Thomas Adès wrote a great opera called. Well, he wrote a few. I forget the one that I'm talking about with just sort of very psychedelic. And there are ways of doing it that I really appreciate. When I was in high school, I would get like student rush tickets to the Met Opera a lot because I went to high school in New York and I saw a lot of them. And I had this like every time I was there, I was like dreaming of being able to like produce that at some point, but I didn't necessarily. But more just because like I felt like they were so boring that I was like I could make something really cool. Like why are they, but that's, I don't know. So it is like, I like the medium, but I don't know if I really like the culture around it, and I don't know if I really like most of what's in it in some ways. Like, it doesn't speak to me personally, but I believe in it as a medium, yeah.
Where did the lyrics come from in the opera?
Good question. It was a poet friend of mine, he's a painter and a cook, and we met at a restaurant because we both worked at this restaurant in New Haven, and we started hanging out, and he had a website, and I saw his poetry, and he wrote a piece called Beautiful Bastard, and that's what I ended up using. We both, I guess, have experience with growing up with absent fathers, and that spoke to me a lot at that time. And then there was also this idea of like masculine, feminine, the son, the daughter, and this like convoluted idea of like these characters being small on stage, and it just kind of fit with what I wanted. Kulimushi Barongozi is his name. He worth looking up too. I'll give you his website. Yeah.
Do you have like a card or like your email?
I do. Yeah. I don't have a card,
I'd love
but
to,
yeah, absolutely. We should totally.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I'm here till May 5th, by the way. If anyone has a cool recommendation of things to do, cool stuff to see. I'm going to the ZAC tonight at 6:30. I have two of my friends are playing, I think, in the jazz show. Yeah.
I have another question. I guess I keep thinking about this like intersection of the auditory composition side of things, but how much you're questing for this visual piece, and I'm just really curious about that intersection, and it's clear that you're really curious about that intersection, and maybe like that kind of palpating around that. I'm trying to figure out what my question is, but it has to do something with like, it feels like you're trying to like discover something, which is maybe also why you feel like you don't know exactly what you're trying to discover, because that's that field of unknown. And I can't help but think about humans' propensities for like pattern making and pattern recognition, and like music by its traditional context is about pattern recognition and resonance, and you're kind of in this sphere of disabling the pattern to discover a new one, or
or
I don't know. I'm just curious.
That's a perfectly worded question for what I'm doing, because I don't know really. I'm in the same boat as you right now. It's like patterns are huge for me, actually. That's thanks for pointing that out. It's like if I can latch on to something that comes up. Debussy is a composer of classical music who I admire, and he wrote this piece about the ocean called La Mer, where like everything happens twice in really rapid succession, but the things that happen are so wild and kind of all over the place that the unity is created because of these like moments being repeated. So you actually do feel a sense of like unity. It's not just kind of like noise. There's this like musical unifying element, which is just like the way he did it was just like repeating everything just like twice throughout the whole piece. And I think like when you get keyed into that, it's beautiful. It's a really interesting device. This is a pattern that I think can translate into music somehow. And that's all. Yeah, that's all I really know. I think I spent a long time developing my musical voice and like finding it. And I think I got to this point where like I know how I want my music to sound. And I just haven't had as much time, or just I haven't thought about it visually as much. Another issue for me is like endings and beginnings, and what I like about visual art is the sense that like you can decide how long you're going to spend time with a piece, and you can keep it moving, and that's what I really like about being more of a sound artist rather than a composer, because I really somehow does building the narrative, like narrating through a piece, doesn't speak to me as much as like presenting a really interesting sound. So I think that is helping me kind of delve into visuals as well. It's like idea of like atemporality. It's almost a form of freedom that I get to kind of like put something there and it works visually and it doesn't have to be listened to anymore. Yeah. Steve.
Everything seems to be so grounded in Western, your Western thinking about music, Western, and I'm just wondering, you know, when I listen to like the way I think of more East Asian stringed instruments, and I'm wondering if you listen to much music from the East.
I can't say I have. I mean, I'm sure I have, but not, you know.
And just the continuity of, like in some of the compositions, that there's no silence. There's just sound.
Yeah.
Continual sound.
Well, there is that organ that you play, like,
Yeah.
and I think it has something that I'm not actually. I don't really know if that's what you mean, but there's this sort of like continuous, like, the point of it is to be this like continuous sound. There is that like gagaku, which is like a Japanese opera, where there's always that kind of organ is like always present, and then like these waves. The didgeridoo is like circular breathing on the didgeridoo is like is sort of the method of playing where you just never cease to create the sound.
You know?
That's really interesting. I should definitely look into more. I'm definitely a product of the West.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wholeheartedly. It's just, where I grew up. Debussy actually was really inspired by gamelan music.
Right.
So I do think in some ways, in some like weird mutated ways, that's made it into my work. I would love to play the gamelan at some point in some ensemble. It's like a super fun experience. I know people who really enjoy it. But yeah, it's all to come. Thank you.
I loved the wrestling piece. I loved the visuals. I thought they were absolutely like stunning to look at. You talked about something called jitter, and I have no idea what that is. Can you explain that?
Sure. Yeah. Jitter is so there's a program called MaxMSP that by Tom that does like a it's like a signal processing language that's a visual language that is used to connect like messages to objects and Cycling 74, yeah. It's worth just going on their website and checking out.
Pretty neat.
It originally started to output sound, I believe, and then they added this like ability to output like visual signal. You can do a lot with it. There's also a cool community that makes patches that you don't necessarily have to. It gets super dense, and so you can actually see what's been made before and like use it, and it's pretty user friendly once it's like made and yeah.
I was gonna say, is it an open source program?
It's subscription. There's a subscription, but the patches are like, as far as I know, no one's like copyrighting their patches.
No, it's pretty freeware. I mean, there's like some folks on Patreon that I follow that keep. Andrew Robbins, he's awesome. He's got some really cool stuff. I'm obviously a Max nerd.
Yeah.
Of course.
That's cool. I love that. Yeah. Just a quick aside, if you're interested in Max, there's another program called Open Music that outputs just MIDI. that's something that interests you.
Open music.
Open music. It's totally free. It was developed in the 80s in Paris, and there's this one Jacques Bresson who's updating it every single year to run with the new operating systems, and it's just him. It's part of the IRCAM Research Center in Paris, and so this is something that they maintain, but it's really kind of basic but super powerful. It has great documentation. It's like, great. It has extensive documentation. It's not super like easy to parse all the time. Some of it's in French and like, but it's really fun. I just had a lot of fun with it, and it's also kind of visually stimulating. So there's some potential there. But yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks so much for listening.